So, dann würde ich jetzt starten. Einen schönen guten Morgen.
Let me start. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dunya Elemele, and I'm in charge of starting today's lectures. But before I start, let me share a couple of information with you. So you are all in the listening mode, so you cannot speak and take the floor, but from midday we have a Q&A session, and so you have the ability to talk. So if during the lecture and the practical impulse you have any questions, you can post the questions into the chat, or you can remember them, and then at 12 we will have the chance of having a look at all the questions, and we will also have the chance of going through our presentations. So they will not be lost. During my presentation, I will not have a look at the chat. And so I hope you will be able to, you will accept my apologies. So my presentation is being recorded and broadcast also afterwards, but this is not the case for the discussion. So if you want to take part in the discussion afterwards, please note that this lecture is going to be recorded, but not the following discussion. So only this presentation and the presentation by Ms. Schönenbach will be recorded and published, but not the following discussion. So this is it as far as the housekeeping information is concerned. Let me now start with my lecture. My name is Dunya Elemler, and I'm a political scientist, and I've been working in a project called Women Strengthen Women for a year. And we started, as I said, 1 year ago with this project, Women Against Radicalization, supported by the ministry. And it was also commissioned by the ministry. We are an association focusing on services and activities in different services. For example, we work with refugees, and we offered a partnership project where we support people coming from the Ukraine. We also work with the elderly and provide consultancy to women in difficult situations. The project, Women Strengthen Women, my project, as I'm the project leader, has already been presented in DTP online on the 11th of June. So I'm not going into the detail of it, because if you want, you have the possibility of going back to this presentation. But let me focus on the fact that there is scant research on prevention work with and for young women in the field of radicalization. So I will focus on the experience gathered within the framework of my project. The goal of the project was to create work for and services for women who are Muslim, and we want to strengthen them as they grow up and support them. So the idea is to provide a targeted youth work and empowerment. And to do so, young people have to be protected from any form of radicalization. Usually, well, a general statement is important because radicalization is also impacted by local conditions and the local context. Besides an offer for younger women, we also created an offer for their fathers. The idea was to create a group with fathers so that they create a good relationship with their daughters. I will go into the details of it afterwards. Let me talk about the target group of our project. Our project focuses on many younger women, regardless of their religion. And so we talk about women aged 15 to 55. These young women are in the middle of the teenage of the adolescence, and so they are developing mentally and physically. And this is a period which is highly characterized by rebellion against their parents and against any authorities. This is a period characterized by idealism, for example, on how to make the world a better place to live. And there are problems, family problems that may be more or less serious. And they often wonder what they should do in their life. Should they study? Should they go to work? Should they focus on training? And this is a lot of pressure. And on that, we also have further pressure by the circle of friends. They want to belong to a group of friends. And on our target group, we also have the problem and the issue of cultural differences. At home, for example, they may have a relatively traditional parental home, and by contrast, an open circle of friends. Younger women tend to have a double life, one at home and another outdoors, when they are at school or among their friends. And sometimes these young women may have already had experience of discrimination, and they have to cope with it on their own. Generally speaking, this picture of the target group is a description made by a participant to our project. Let's have a look at the background of radicalization processes, because we usually have to cope with the initial situation that I have just described, and this may lead to radicalization. I said may lead, but there is not only one reason for radicalization. There are different factors that play a role: biographical, social, psychological, youth-related factors that may lead to radicalization, and also the places have a role. As far as the methods of radical groups are concerned, we know that they depend on the specific situation of young people. For example, their knowledge, and the complexity of the social context, and this is also enriched by the theory of radicalization. In this group, we have clear roles that are characterized by a patriarchal society, and idealism is also important. Offered is a community and also an elitarian feeling. You have a task, you have a mission to accomplish within this group. This creates a belonging, a sense of belonging and identity. And finally, this is also a possibility to perform protest. So generally speaking, these insights are important for the radicalization of men. But considering the role clarity, we may also consider the role of women, because sometimes the radicalization processes have been described romantically, and this may lead to gender-related issues, because when women have a role and they may have gone to Syria for some romantic ideas, we have to consider that there are further implications. Based on research works, let me share with you some insights about the radicalization processes of young women. On the one hand, we have gender-specific factors for women, and this is a form of self-empowerment and self-efficacy. And this means that young people, through radicalization groups, can have a role as a woman, as a mother. In the beginning, I described the target group and I said that these are young women who are developing as women, and they are also developing their identity as women. And so they have a very clear picture of themselves in terms of mother. Mothers are very important, and this picture is usually described in a very positive fashion. And we also said emancipation is important. At home, they may live in a traditional family, and their brothers, males, have always been very free, but they, as women, have had to stay at home and to lay back. Within these radical groups, they may feel to have equal treatment, and so they all have the same rights and the same sexual position, and so they think they have the same position as men. Let me now focus on the second point on the slide, the family structures. In radical groups, this is often mentioned, but we have a violence in the family, and they usually report about a very bad relationship to their family. They may have experienced violence, especially Salafist families. In their family, they have basically no network of friends, and for this reason, they try to find solutions for a new orientation, especially women who grew up in a traditional patriarchal structured family. Within these structures, they try to find solutions, even if they experience violence in the families. And even if they have a bad relationship with their father, because of this patriarchal system, they try to find a solution within that system. Where they accept, for example, a husband coming from that structure. In the very first moment, this is the solution strategy that women tend to pursue. It is also important to consider the social exclusion mechanism that take place, especially women who experience some religious exclusion. So a woman, for example, who has to carry a veil or will have to carry a veil will not have the same opportunities, the same possibilities as other women who do not have to have this disadvantage. And based on this discrimination experience, radical groups offer protection because they accept women as they are with their religion and religious faith. If we consider both points 3 and 4, you see that we have the same family background. That is, women have basically experienced isolation. They have a history of discrimination and exclusion. During their youth age, when women are looking for their identity, for stability, in this case, they may have found protection in the radical groups. So I'm not very religious, and my family is not very religious. But if I'm always boiled down to a sort of religion, then I have to get information. I have to get some information and more details on this information and about this religion. And so in the internet, I can easily find this radical group, and we know how their approach is. They tend to focus on the experience of life. And this is what younger women tend to look for, especially as far as sexuality, spirituality, identity are concerned. In other words, these groups tend first to establish relationships, and afterwards women are attracted into these groups. Let's now come to the role of women in radical Islamic groups or Salafist groups. Well, women usually have the task of recruiting new members and passing on the ideology. So they have a crucial task in setting the scene and in retaining the old and new members. This promotion is carried out in the social media, in the internet, but also in their context. For example, if they have children in kindergartens, when they take children to school. Besides this work for focusing on the recruitment of new members, they are also very important in complying with the rules. So they tend to exercise pressure on each other so that rules are respected. So women, for example, are obliged to carry a veil. They should not go outside of their own, etc. They are also important in raising funds, so in the financing of radical groups, for example, by selling baked goods or others. So they help the group finding resources, financial resources. Criminal offences, well, they usually support criminal offences from a logistical viewpoint, but they are rarely actively involved in criminal offences. Well, in the public perception, they are not usually visible, but they play a crucial and central role in these groups because they basically lay the foundations for the establishment and the retention of this group. So they are actually key for the survival of the group. And this is how they are usually perceived. But if we consider young women, if they do not know anything else, if they have no one else, both in the society and within their family, so if they do not have peers, and on top of that, they may have lived in a traditionally patriarchal family, well, they tend to carry out this type of propaganda as well. And for this reason, our approach in the project was to promote an intergenerational exchange. We do not only work with young people in order to strengthen them, but we work also and especially with their parents. And in particular, with their fathers. We tried to set up fathers groups so that they have room for discussing the important things in the life of their daughters. And we try to establish a dialogue so that they can exchange views and so that fathers and daughters can establish a dialogue. We know that and we see that younger women find some cohesion through this dialogue. At the same time, we create a safe space for younger women for the development of their own thoughts and ideas. We want them to develop, to recognize their strengths so that they can be further developed. We do not focus on religion. If this topic is brought out by women themselves, we discuss it, of course, but we do not perform any religious training. We tend to focus on a multifaceted offer with specific religious orientations, so that women can develop their own view and their own opinion. Let me now focus on the project experiences, so that now I'd like to focus on 4 concrete examples with some results that we have been achieving in the field of radicalization research, especially as far as women are concerned. So first of all, we have the cultural challenges because many project leaders report that women are very present in the intercultural dialogue, and the interaction between the life at home and the life among friends, or life outside with the society, is very important and has a great impact on the life of young people, of young women. For example, at home, there is still the expectation that young women are not sexually active, and our local project managers have been asked to perform also some sexual education within the group. So on the one hand, we also have some requests from the parents themselves, because this has always been a taboo, but we also have a perception of trust from fathers vis-a-vis the local group. And then we have the issue of the first boyfriend. And this is a hot topic which is usually dealt with among friends, but this is again a taboo in the family. And this means that young women tended to have a double life, one face outside with their friends, and another face, another life at home in the mosque. And they tended to show another self. And if we look at these women, well, these women are about to develop themselves and they try to find an identity, but there is already in the beginning a double identity, and it's difficult to retain this. Then we have discrimination experiences and rejection issues that we have been talking about in our groups and also by the project managers. Young women report they have already been discriminated, and they also see this in social media. In Hamburg, for example, something happens and this can be read also in Stuttgart, and this can lead to different identity characteristics. There is always a rhetoric between majority and minority, and we as women, as young women, belong to the minority. All the others are the majority. And so since the very beginning, the young person feels as a minority, as marginalized and discriminated. The same applies to bullying at school. A young person, for example, was reported that at school he was called as a bomb attacker because of his background. And we also have to consider the importance of appreciation in this context. In our project, young women have appreciated that this project has been developed for them as a group of young people, and it is funded by the ministry. So the majority, the society, gives money for them, and this is a sign of appreciation that is very important in terms of self-confidence for these young people who tend to feel part of the society. Finally, we also saw a great need for discussion spaces in which young women and girls can have their say. This great participation in the groups when they tend to take the floor, develop their thoughts, is very important. Let me go on because time is tight. The next point is about youth-specific factors. We know that rebellion is very important, that there's a strong need for belonging. So a person, for example, said she found a second family in the group, and we have a language which is emotionally characterized, and this is because they're looking for stability, for a specific structure. A woman, for example, reported, a mother, for example, said that her daughter, who was very introverted, managed to be much more open. And the same applies to self-confidence, self-love, recognizing the abilities and dealing with social media. These are all important elements that have been developed. We have already reached great successes. For example, a young woman reported that through this project, she managed to overcome depression. And again, we talked about the importance of trust. We develop trust and a greater sense of identification. If we have a dark-haired project leader, we get much more trust by the target group. There are some cultural codes that have to be stuck to, and for this reason, we also have to consider that we should not focus on one single cultural background. We have a role model function by the project leader. Project leader are not only Muslim, they are from different backgrounds and they work in collaboration. And this is very important for this group. Let me now, in conclusion, come to the theories that we may then discuss during the Q&A session. It is important, based on the picture that I have described, that in the society, although the issue is not so present, well, in the society, we still have all the factors, all the push factors that I've described. So, and these factors do not necessarily lead to radicalization. We know that radicalization is a reaction to something. It's not a predisposition. These people are not radical from the very beginning. So this is well known. But we must find solutions within the society to the problems that young women have. And if we didn't do so, we have a problem. And that's the reason why radicalization is a reaction. Secondly, we have to know that democratic values have to be learned, because anyone can fall out of the social safety net. Also, the sense of belonging is something that is being developed, is not congenital, is not given by birth. It's not that radicalization develops among younger women in a special place in Saxony through the internet. So the sense of belonging develops, is something that is developing. Point number 4, gender stereotypes and racist prejudices lead to misconceptions in dealing with women involved in radicalization processes. In this case, we have to consider this component very seriously and take the necessary measures. And finally, successful prevention work needs a culturally sensitive youth work that doesn't stigmatize women. So this is my final slide. You see the literature and the sources. And I will now hand over to Ms. Schönenbach, and I will see you back during the Q&A session.